Hello and welcome to day 113 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlin Nyback, and we'll jump right into it, try to get back on schedule. An interesting day yesterday with some interesting facts. Try not to digress too much. I just saw something on television about a very bad train accident in Alabama years ago. And this accident was the convergence of so many forces. I mean, you couldn't get better odds in Las Vegas of the things that needed to happen at specific moments in time to have an Amtrak train traveling over 70 miles an hour derailing and killing 40 some people, I think, died in that wreck. Uh, so many, uh, so many errors, but in concert, happening in sequence, and that's a lot. I say that to say that that's what has happened with slavery, with the black persons, those descended from slaves. That their issue in the world history, this combination of searching for wealth, recovery of nations from war, uh, the technological advances of sailing over the ocean, um, ignorance, so much of indigenous life in Africa and in the Americas, uh, greed, just snowballing domination, a lot of interesting moments in history happen. I'm glad I'm doing this just for my personal edification. At least it's clear in my mind. I was just a long way from some of the resolutions that I would like to see, but at least the argument is becoming clearer as I kind of regurgitate what I feel is going on. So thanks for hanging in there. Day 113. Let's get into it. Let's get back to some normalcy of ourselves here. I thought yesterday was important aspect and fact to hash out. Let's see what we get into today. My two thoughts emerge as I get into this project. First thought has two parts. First part is the black mind of slavery, ignorance, vulnerability. Oh, or marginalization. Are we perpetuating it in ourselves? Or is it an environmental pressure? Uh, is it a natural phenomenon in our thinking? What keeps the black person in their space? If we just looked at them, we can talk about a lot of outside influences and forces, but are there internal questions to be answered of why blacks are still in this? And we can talk about some issues. We'll talk about one in just a moment. And then the second side is the same coin, same thought is, does the white mind of privilege, entitlement, expectation of favor get passed on from generation to generation? Is it, um, I'm not asking white people to, you know, go around with a sad face that their ancestors done to my ancestors and stuff like that. I'm not asking the question of the prevailing thought, the prevailing consciousness of an entire people, a majority, um, if you will. Do they still, is it just by default that this manner of thinking prevails among white people? Uh, we'll find out. If you've stuck around here, you know how I might answer that, but I want you to think for yourself. Always do your own research about this and challenge me. I'm having a great Some great conversations have sprung up with one of the subscribers here. You all don't know each other, and I've done that purposefully. I haven't figured out if I even want everyone communicating with one another. We'll see. That's down the road. Now, the second thought is for my burden for financial literacy, especially among Black folks. Uh, Education is powerful, but it's not the end-all, be-all that public education would tell us, you know, about continuing education, going further into debt. Some of those things are falling away. Those ideas had a place in history. You kind of move beyond that, especially with the advent of the internet. There's nothing beyond our reach to know. We can learn how to build bombs, do heart surgery, brain surgery, run cities, uh, you know, dive into oceans without getting wet. You know, it's the information age. So the place and prominence of education is losing that edge. That's losing the edge towards specialization, mentorship, internet, you know, plenty of good stuff out there. So not just racial stuff and conversations, but everything. So for financial literacy, that does begin to give us power, because now I know in my life personally, I know where, at least if I'm spending what I may consider exposable dollars, income, then I have more control over where it goes. I understand nations that are antagonistic to Black wealth and growth. I know to be sensitive as I spend with them. I know, you know, why it is that their products are flooded American markets, and so my choices are limited. Uh, but at least I can spend that money in a conscientious way. Okay, that gives me power. Also, know understanding Federal Reserve, some of the big institutionalized uh, issues with money internationally, things I need to be sensitive to that. That helps me uh, have the ability to resist enriching uh, these uh, other institutions and cultures antagonistic to Black wealth and prosperity. Those things, but it comes from financial literacy. Um, uh, you know, I want to do more than start a business. I want my assets to buy assets, to buy assets, to maintain assets that I live off. You know, much the like the slave idea is much alive. You know, there's a place where it works in a way. You know, I don't want to exploit necessarily in a certain individual or a group, but I want to create a space that's going to um, kind of sustain itself, sustain me, and by other uh, mechanisms of sustenance. That's how the wealthy do it. That's kind of what has been on my mind for decades. It's another thing I've not known how to articulate, but I've been introduced to the work of a man named Robert Kiyosaki, and it's revolutionizing the lives of a lot of people. And it needs to happen for here mentally first, and it's actually given me some direction for the next handful of years coming up in my life. The changes. There's been a certain momentum, economic momentum in my life that's going to take some time to turn around, but my thinking begins up here, right up here, between the ears. Now, racially and slavery-wise, what we're really here for, where the conversation begins, is happens because I was been inspired by another man named Dr. Claude Anderson. I've never met him, but his works have just revolutionized my thinking again. Please get these books. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth. Uh, uh, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And Dr. Anderson's Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C., just so it's not all humdrum slavery and whatnot, implying hate and slavery and oppression. All the time we take a fictional look at the lives of slaves, slave masters, slave industry, slave states, escapism, blackface, you name it, all kinds of abuses, injustices, marginalization, from Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uh, it's not banned in America, but if sometimes I feel if the powers that be understood the power of that book of what she has written there, they would have made a more concerted effort to suppress that work. The South did when it came out, mid 1800s. Uh, I'm glad the message prevailed. I'm glad I stumbled onto it. So every once in a while we have story time, what I call it. And we've taken a big long break because of the series we're doing on the signers of the Declaration of Independence. But we're going to get right back to it in a couple days now. It's like we got maybe a little more than a week to go. Behind me, you'll see hashtag us too. Is Black women kind of coming together as a kind of a response to the hashtag Me Too. I guess the Black women felt there was not enough Black representation in the white hashtag Me Too movement. I'm sure it's not as polarized as I'm saying it, but there was Black women felt some issues, so they created this. And I'm sure other groups are there too. Go to Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook. Socialize there. And that's, if you found me here, you are informationally, technologically literate. You can find your flavor. I encourage you to do your own due diligence to find the community that fits you best. Okay, here we go. Day 113. We're still going through our signers of the Declaration of Independence. Let's see what we can find out today. We're first up, Edward Rutledge, born 1749, died 1800. Lawyer, like many of these guys, all of them actually probably dabbled in law, know the law. If they're merchants or plantation owners, business owners, then they know the law. They know how to maybe manipulate the law, to anticipate the law, to have an impact on new laws coming up and taxation and things like that. So a lot of them are involved with laws. The lawyers proper, though there are a lot of lawyers come up in this list, no surprise. He's representing South Carolina, so in southern state, southern colony. We kind of get an idea of his view on slavery. That'll come up in just a moment when we get to the religion slavery question. Remember, all this is in the description underneath this video. It's called the brief notes. This is what I send out in the private emails as well, because some people have data issues. So a lot of people don't watch the video, they'll just read the notes and I'll get some feedback in that way. So he's listed, and also I'm referencing Wikipedia here, okay? Also, he's this youngest signer at age 26 of the Declaration of Independence. Now, that's an interesting age. Like, I don't know, like, when I was 26, I was still kind of going through a lot of changes and challenges coming out of maybe are going into the height of my harmonism. So 26 is not an age that you would, attach a lot of responsibility to. So uh, him being accepted among the other 55 men is pretty impressive um, for that time. Now, um, it's kind of scalable because once you hit mid 30s, 40s, you're starting to that's starting to be considered old age. You know, I'm still doing incredibly physically manual labor here in my 50s. So not probably not so much back then. It was just a different lifestyles and medicine, nutrition had a whole different thing. Although the people were probably lived closer to the land, so to speak, had that know-how. So, but his 26, it was still had to be a mature 26 to uh, represent a state at the Second Continental Congress. Artillery captain for South Carolina. We can probably open the books and find skirmishes and battles all up and down the East Coast through the colonies, between the colonists and the British, patriots and loyalists. Educated in London, no surprise there. Remember, this is the good old boys club. They're marrying into each other's families, they're educated, they're dropping names, streets, and schools they've been in London and whatnot. He was also one of the people captured, I think, as we've gone through this, the men, especially associated with the South, may have been closer, maybe to a different kind of conflict. So he's named among two other guys uh, that were captured by the British, let go in a prisoner exchange after the war. His Anglican roots, as far as religion, showed up. He's the Anglicans have ties to the Church of England, and there's always, but besides the economic, taxation, the representation issues of separating from England, there are also new churches and styles are springing up as the colonies separate from European influence. It's about making a clean break from uh, from the former oppressors. So especially we see like the Episcopalians with their liturgies very um, follows with all other churches back in England. So we let go of the Pope, but the Episcopalians now have a bishop here on this mainland. Is what has happened with a lot of religions um, through this transition, this historical transition. Firm slavery supporter. I kind of took some liberty in the notes of the conversation as we queried uh, uh, Mr. Rutledge here about his attitude towards slavery. He was very vocal. This came out in Wikipedia, but very vocal about how the Northern abolitionists were really overreaching, trying to do a land grab on slavery rights and abolition and things like that. This we can have a short discussion about triangular trade. That's a term came out in Wikipedia. I was always taught the Golden Triangle, and there's more than one, but generally the Golden Triangle was raw materials and goods are shipped over to Europe, England, we'll say mostly. They get refined, processed. The cotton becomes garments, and sugar is processed, all that stuff. Then we shipped south to Africa, along Africa, uh, essentially, and then that's traded for slaves, and a lot of slaves and alcohol is coming from uh, West Africa on back up to the colonies, and so you have this triangular trade route that goes clockwise. If you're looking down at the Atlantic Ocean, it goes clockwise because they're following the prevailing the winds and currents of the Atlantic Ocean. It just that that activity facilitates just moving in that direction around the Atlantic Ocean, and that was kind of that's how trade happened. Slaves, raw material, processed material, slaves, raw material, processed material, slaves, and on and on. Um, very, very important. Made a lot of people rich, enslaved a lot of people as well. Um, but that's just the way it was. That's another factor in cementing slavery, cementing the dominance of white society, not only in the Western Hemisphere but on the Earth. The current for the ships. The ships they weren't just haphazardly crisscrossing any which way the Atlantic Ocean. They kind of gave in to the cyclical nature of Mother Nature's way with the Atlantic Ocean. That was another factor, we could say, in white people's success, black people's marginalization. And we just say he signed as a representative of the people of South Carolina. Whatever was happening, bottom line, like it wasn't, we need to extract any moral reasons and uh, any idealism about separating from England. If the monarchy had been more conducive towards the prosperity of the people in the colonies, we'd have a whole different system, whole different thing going on in the world. But like all men, black, brown, white, there's that unrelenting tendency to overreach, to never have enough, to never leave well enough alone. They just want to push it and go a little bit more. As we find stock markets crashing like that, we find groups getting upset. Sri Lanka is recovering from bombs. They're finding bombs today over there, because some group feels either disenfranchised or not being heard, or they just want to see the world burn, for whatever reason, you know. Uh, for some reason, this individual has slighted this individual, and conflict is between them. You know, sad that the human condition, it's incurable, insatiable, unrelenting, has no end in sight uh, to a world peace paradigm prevailing. It seems impossible. I think it's possible. Just leave people alone, give each other their space. But, oh boy, here we go. All right, getting back to this. Next representative up is our man Robert Sherman, born 1721, died 1793. He's another lawyer, and interesting for him, he was a lawyer without any formal education. I found that very intriguing. So he must have knew his stuff just immersed himself, enjoyed the subject. Kind of like me with music. When I got when my education when music began to get formalized, I came with a whole lot of tools already in place. I just had no idea the power I was working with, but it was formalized, and I was educated by that stuff. So this guy, Roger Sherman, I believe he came to the bar with a lot of those gifts already. Probably had an insatiable appetite for law libraries and his mentors. He probably impressed his mentors and all that. He was one of the what's called the Committee of Five. Five men are, uh, we say, get credit for drafting the Declaration of Independence. So we got Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy Adams of Amistad fame, and Robert Livingston. Uh, very, very interesting. Now, Dr. Anderson, he goes into detail about he really believes that these men, possibly these five men, when they drafted the Declaration of Independence, other documents, that they were specific and they deliberately used language to exclude black folks uh, from uh, participating in the wealth and opulence of the new nation. We see seeds of that fact in early Maryland law, and how Maryland in the 1600s, somewhere in there, they disenfranchised black folks, and now there's black folks in a welfare state 25 years later are extremely vulnerable, and Maryland goes ahead and does its overreach and declares all black folks to be slaves. So Dr. Anderson he believes well in his heart that when a handful of men went into back rooms or whatever to create some of the documents, the Declaration, Constitution, and whatnot, that the conversation was around excluding black folks. Tough though, if John Quincy Adams was a part of that conversation to a degree, since he was your humanitarian champion, So it's I don't know if it's documented that that event happened, but it's an interesting thing to think about when we think about the Declaration, Articles of Confederation, Constitution, other important documents on which this nation rests. I would question whether we're whether we are coming from that space now, though. That'd be an interesting debate. Roger Sherman, uh, he was from Connecticut, I think. Forgot to write down the darn state. Wait a minute. I think I have it here. I'm sorry, Massachusetts. He was Massachusetts representative. Congregationalists, autonomy of the respective congregations. Bible believing individuals. So not a whole lot of slavery commentary with him, and he signed as a representative of the will of the people of Massachusetts. So there we go. Two more guys out the way. Day 113. We're going to roll right along. Don't want to hold you too far over. Just I want to thank you for hanging in there for 113 straight days. And We're well on our way. We got a lot of momentum. It's kind of become a lifestyle. I'm already thinking ahead of maybe some other projects that I would just might continue here. I think it's good for me mentally. Helps me articulate arguments, get a sense. Oh, it's helping me personally ground myself here in America, no matter what identity I am. Now I'm finding resources and people knowledgeable about my experience, people I have never even known, and it's helping me to go to some next levels that I've been struggling to break through for a very long time. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Thanks for hanging out with me again. Let's spend some time together tomorrow at 365 Days Towards Racial Change. I'll see you tomorrow.